More addicted to the drug you get, the harder the withdrawals are. My name's Eric. This is above my pay grade. Let's get into it. So what's this drug I'm talking about? It's called quantitative easing. Quantitative easing. You guys have probably heard this in the news. And again, I think it's important to not complicate finances, because you can have a guy with a 10-pound brain and a PhD explain quantitative easing to you. And you're like, okay, what? It doesn't make a lot of sense. And I think the best person to explain it would be Jerome Powell himself, the head of the Federal Reserve. So let's listen.
Fair to say you simply flooded the system with money?
Yes, we did. That's another way to think about it. We did.
Where does it come from? Do you just print it?
We print it digitally. So we as a central bank, we have the ability to create money digitally, and we do that by buying treasury bills or bonds or other government guaranteed securities, and that actually increases the money supply. We also print actual currency, and we distribute that through the Federal Reserve Bank.
So that's Jerome Powell in response to 60 Minutes interview from what they did in response to the coronavirus. Quantitative easing. So what is it? So in layman's terms, quantitative easing on the money market, if it happened in your life, if you needed to sell a car or a house, and it's not a great house, it's a dilapidated piece of crap, and you're asking way too much for it. Same with your car. No worries. They don't want issues. The Federal Reserve doesn't want issues with the car market and the housing market. The government will just come in and buy your house or your car. That is quantitative easing. At its base level, if there's no demand for the asset, the Federal Reserve buys it to keep the market propped up. Just like if it happened in your life, they would buy your house. No matter how crappy it is, no matter how overpriced it is, they'll buy it. Same thing with your crappy car, they'll buy it. Simple, basic, that's what quantitative easing is. Does that make any sense to you? No. Essentially, it is us, the Federal Reserve, which is not federal and has no reserves. Topic for another day. But it is our central bank buying assets from private businesses and government. So if the government wants to sell bonds and they need to create more debt to pay for their horrible decisions during the coronavirus, the Federal Reserve will just buy them. If it was on the open market, no one would buy the government debt because they're just printing money. But the Federal Reserve will do it. And you heard it from Jerome Powell. A lot of this stuff seems unbelievable. If you watched my video on banks the other day, this is kind of what I'm hinting at when you get into the banking system and the Federal Reserve. That's why I'm wearing this cool hat, #InTheFed, because the Federal Reserve is un-American. It does not promote free markets in the slightest. What it does is create money out of thin air. And the quote on the video the other day was, if money is free, then money is worthless. And think about it in your own life. Why do you trust dollars? I've stopped trusting dollars. We still transact in dollars, but this whole system, the whole Ponzi scheme, is based off of trust. And one day, the Federal Reserve is going to come in, and there's going to be enough people that are like, wait a second, you're printing money from nothing and buying up assets from the federal government. What that ultimately means is if you think money is a store of energy. In other words, if you save money, you're saving energy that you expended that you're going to spend later. However, if the masses say, you know what, they're creating so much of this, not from expended energy, just out of thin air, adding a couple digits, to make sure we don't have a crash, that they don't trust the system anymore. That's the whole That's the whole house of cards. One day, we're going to be playing poker with the Federal Reserve like we are now, and no one's going to buy their bluff anymore. No one's going to do it. So what I ask people to do is not complicate the financial world, because you can watch a financial channel like CNBC, and they use so much academic language that people turn their brain off, because they're like, well, I guess quantitative easing works. We didn't have a Great Depression during COVID and no one was working and the stock market went up, and I guess it's too complicated for me to understand. What it is the Federal Reserve printing money and buying up assets, so artificially creating demand. And if you think that money should be attached to some kind of labor or energy, what they are intentionally doing is devaluing your labor. They are taking money from you by devaluing the dollar. So what are you going to do about it? Are you going to stay in this system that is where they can artificially create money, they can buy up assets even if the free market doesn't want to buy them, all to prevent a crash in the short term? But just like the drug addict, if you keep staying on the drug, the withdrawals get worse because the addiction gets worse. And our economy is addicted to quantitative easing, which is the Federal Reserve buying up assets on the free market. If you've ever heard of a mortgage-backed security, which essentially creates demand in the housing market, and you're wondering why are these houses so expensive? Because the free market isn't buying mortgage-backed securities. The Federal Reserve is. They have $1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, $9 trillion on their balance sheet. What? $9 trillion? This stuff doesn't make sense. And so if you kind of understand that they're creating money from nothing and money should be stored energy, therefore they're stealing your labor and energy, then you would think the Federal Reserve is as un-American as I do. So what are we going to do about it? We have to go to a different system. The system they create requires trust, and I don't trust the Federal Reserve. I don't trust them. They avoid the short-term pain, and that will make, I guarantee you this, the long-term pain way worse. When people don't buy the bluff, when that happens, there will be blood in the streets, metaphorically speaking. All these assets that are propped up from free money, people will realize the fundamentals of supply and demand and free market capitalism weren't there and haven't been there for decades. So I encourage you to look into this. The whole interview with Jerome Powell is down in the description. But you just print money? Yeah, you just print it. Yeah, it makes sense. No, it doesn't. So, in other funny news, if you guys have ever thought to yourself, I would love to live at Disneyland or Disney World for the rest of my life, you will have your chance. Disney World is now making neighborhoods. So you can live in a Disney neighborhood and maybe have Mickey Mouse bring you coffee or whatever. The idea of living in a Disney neighborhood, what do they call it? Storybook living. That seems like hell to me. You got the pool and Little Mermaid swimming around. A kid might like that, but I'm an adult. I don't want to be, I don't want to live in Amazon land or Best Buy land, and I don't want to live in Disneyland. But you guys let me know in the comments if you would ever be interested in living in a Disney World neighborhood and having Toy Story characters bringing you your lunch. Doesn't seem like something I'd want to do. Anyways, y'all, bit of a rant today, but thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. If you think this stuff is important, I'd ask you to share this with friends and family. Please like, share, subscribe, do the YouTube stuff. And I will see you in the next video. Later.